The PM will see you now. Ronan Patterson could barely conceal his yawn as he fidgeted uncomfortably on his chair in the Downing Street press room. He'd been up all night with the lawyers and then his editor to check if they were on the right side of the bane of his life, libel law. Checking his watch, he realised that PM Howard Perkins was well known for his tardiness. He just wanted to get back home and sleep. God knows that things were tough enough with his wife right now, and he wanted to avoid another fight over his not being around to help with the baby and pulling an all-nighter. It didn't help that she had once been his editor and resented seeing him in the thick of things. He couldn't have foreseen that she would recoil from it all once little baby Bobby was born. Mornings such as this tugged on his willpower to cease smoking. Finally, the door swung open and in lumbered. It would have been better for the country if he had swept, but the voters get the politicians they deserve. Howard Perkins, the man with the curliest head of hair in all of SW1. Press sessions like this were a rare but new thing and a closely guarded secret, hence having to surrender his phone and only use a notepad and paper to enter the room. Perkins was flanked by his private secretary, Ronnie MacDonald, on the left, and his press secretary, Austin Severn, to his right, who dropped his gaze one by one on the assembly. Although he would never admit it to anyone, Ronan was truly scared of Severn. He had forgotten more grim secrets than most mortals would ever learn, and his grave would most likely be packed with them, unless, of course, there was a big falling out with the PM. Who knows what kind of memoir was publisher ready? Good morning, Severn raised his voice to bring the room to a fearful silence. As you know, we've got some work to do, so who's up first? Looking around the room expectantly as the trio took up their seats at the top table. Grad Banks, Morning Standard, the first brave soul hollered. Yes, Banks? Banks cleared his throat. I have undeclared expenses for a number of the Ace of Spades foreign holidays stretching back 5 years, at the pleasure of Richard Branston of Pennine Airways. Good start. How well documented? And is Branston willing to confirm? I have the email correspondence from Branston himself. He's willing to go on the record if we, the government of course, can look into some of his recent tax problems. Severn exchanged glances with the PM and MacDonald. The PM waved his hand, signalling assent. Okay, that's one for the list. Thank you, Mr. Banks. He only called people by their salutation when he had wrung from them what he wanted. Anyone else able to throw something into the mix to help spice things up? Severn grinned impishly. Now it was his turn. Ronan Patterson, People's Daily, raising his hand after he had spoken, as if he was still in school. Yes, Patterson, our fetid People's Daily, smiling. I've obtained footage, along with testimony of the Ace of Spades taking Class A substances and frolicking with young men at a party when he was needed in a late-night debate on the limits of free speech, when the government was defeated by 1 vote. He knew this was off the charts compared to Mr. Banks, and that his salutation was moments away. I think Mr. Banks just got closer to Journalist of the Year, nodding vigorously with the PM and MacDonald. They stood up together, and the small gathering did likewise. We'll have you run that for tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Banks. A job well done indeed. As they exited from the same door they arrived. Behind the closed doors, the trio entered the PM's office, and they sat down. So that tow rag cost me that vote with his drugs and boys. He'll be gone by tomorrow evening. It's bad enough that he opposed me in cabinet last week. I won't have this treachery, the PM thundered, rattling his lamp when his fist smacked the large desk. MacDonald and Severn both looked directly at the PM. What is it you two are scheming now? Sir, it's time for you to have your own, given it's about a year since you've had all these emergency powers. The people want to think you are still just a regular politician who can be rocked by things outside of his control, Severn said. Go on, the PM being far more astute in private than he let on in public. We have a menu of options, but the one we think resonates best is your wife's spending habits on makeup products. Slightly extravagant, but not enough to cause anything overly harmful. MacDonald was getting into his stride. Why the hell do you have to bring Olivia into this? His eyes narrowing. It deflects from you, but gives a sense of slight chaos and not quite watching the optics on public opinion. We need to throw the plebs something to make you look like you're one of them and a little vulnerable. This was harder than MacDonald had thought. The PM folded his arms and slumped into his chair. We can drop this off at the press on Friday night, after she has gone out of town to ensure she's out of the limelight. And you can give a statement on Sunday saying it's all a fuss over nothing and that you are too busy governing to bother with any of this. We can get you looking a little bit tired and rattled to give the plebs a sense that you have had a bad time of it. And then it's job done. Very well, waving them off and looking up to see that his gesture had no effect. Why are you both still here? I'm afraid we have a little bit of business to do to reshuffle the cabinet and replace the Foreign Secretary, MacDonald said, raising his eyebrow.